good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the World Paper Money Club. It's 6:30 here, Pacific Standard Time, and our special guest today is...
My name is Philip Thomas, and I am a professional paper money grader and specialist for, let's say, a prominent third-party grading company, one of the prominent third-party grading companies out there.
Oh, great. All right, and you're based here in Los Angeles as well as we are, correct?
Correct.
And so let's just start from the beginning and tell us what number one, how long have you been a professional grader?
Well, I've been associated with paper money to some extent, or numismatics to some extent, since a very young age, since really the mid 1980s. My father was a coin collector, and I think a lot of us paper money types gravitate to paper money from a background in coins. At least that's, at least half or more of us started out in coins to some extent, and then while doing our thing with coins, we kind of, hey, what's this in the showcase over here? This bigger object that's a lot more colorful and a lot more historically rich here than these little small metal discs. So I think I'm going to be interested in this paper money more than these coins. So this was back in the 80s. We used to go to coin shows across Southern California. In fact, I think I've been to, quite a few Long Beach coin shows. Our big coin show out here in California is in Long Beach. It's held 3 times a year. And I've been going since the mid to late 80s. And I've stayed involved in paper money to some extent over the years, whether it was just a subscription to Banknote Reporter or the Green Sheet, hitting up some shops and shows across California, actually across the western part of the U.S. And then maybe about 12 to 15 years ago, I kind of picked it up, started kind of dealing, small time kind of vest pocket dealing on eBay and buying and selling and collecting, participating in some registry sets, some competitions from one of the 2 third-party graders here in the U.S. And then maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I came on board one of the grading companies, the main grading companies, and I've been with them for about 3 or 4 years in my current capacity.
Awesome. So let's go back to like 2005 when the prominent coin grading companies segued into currency. I think because they realized for the advance of currency collecting, they needed to be similar to coins. And so they started, they realized that there was an opportunity to start grading currency. So, and I think your company was one of those, if I'm correct. And so we've advanced in a number of ways in design and in labels and in holders. And that's one of my questions, is that people that get notes graded, they're always concerned about the note that's encased in the holder. So maybe you could talk about where we are with holders and is there any problems for the notes?
So third-party grading of banknotes, paper money. By the way, I'll be using the term banknote and paper money and paper currency and notes interchangeably. There's a little bit of distinction in terms of the exact definitions of each of those, but if I say banknote or currency or note, it all means the same thing. The first iteration of third-party grading for paper money was actually prior to 2005. There was a company called CGA.
Oh, yes.
And it was run out of the East Coast of the U.S. They kind of got a real head start on everyone else, I think as early as 99 or 2000. Mm-hmm. And there were some issues with integrity with that company at the time. Grade, I guess you can call it grade inflation, or...
That's a good way of putting it. I know the guy that started it, but we don't need to name names, but that's okay.
And their initial, I mean, the grades were, it depends on the era. They were accurate at some point, and then they became very untrustworthy. Their holder was rather lackluster. It was very thin, susceptible to damage. When you encapsulate something in a holder, you expect to have it secured and protected from inadvertent, incidental handling or something being shipped through the mail. You hope it would survive a little bit of a bend or a bump in transit. But those original CGA holders were paper thin. They're basically they did the note no good, and I think the market eventually started rejecting those holders. They wanted something a little more durable, a little more sturdy, and they wanted a little more integrity in terms of the actual grade consistency. So there was, even despite the presence of CGA, and by the way, CGA graded over 100,000 notes in their time. I think they graded almost 200,000 notes. So they weren't a small player to begin with. They graded a lot of material, including a lot of high value material. Despite their presence, there was a need in the marketplace for additional third-party graders, second opinions, if you will. It's not always nice. You go to the doctor, let's say, and the doctor gives you a diagnosis. It's always nice to go get a second opinion, right? So people wanted to have a reputable, trustworthy second opinion available to them, and they got it. They got a second and a third opinion in the form of two prominent grading companies for paper money that had been grading coins for a number of years prior. Two new companies that have had a specialization in paper currency, effective 2005. Both are still around today. Both parent companies are still around today. There's been a couple iterations of one of the grading companies throughout the years. There was a spinoff, and then there was a reclamation of that brand, and there was a little bit of a rebrand done recently with one of them. But both of the two reputable grading companies worldwide, both companies have worldwide presence, but their corporate headquarters are, of course, U.S. based. Both are still alive and well, highly respected, accepted at every major auction house worldwide, and both are going strong. Here we are 18 years later.
And they both use the same system. I talked about the 70-point system earlier, but their break points within those 70 points are exactly the same. Yes,
they're identical. It's a 70-point scale. It's called the Sheldon scale, Sheldon Numismatic scale. It's a 70. It's a scale from 1 to 70, but that doesn't mean it goes up incrementally by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are breaking points, like you said, Scott. So it goes from 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and then it jumps to 6 and 8 and 10, 12, 15. Now you're at fine level. Then you have 20, 25, 30, and 35, which are the very fine categories, or VF categories. Then you have 40 and 45, which are XF, extra fine or extremely fine. Then you have, both companies recognize 4 different AU grade levels: 50, 53, 55, and 58. It's considered AU, or depending on who you talk to, about uncirculated or almost uncirculated.
That's right.
Then you get up to the 60s, 60 or higher, which are considered the uncirculated grade categories. 60, 61, 62 are uncirculated notes, meaning they have never been in circulation. There's no folds, complete folds, edge to edge through the design. They've never been in a wallet, or they've never sustained the type of folding that is typically seen as a result of circulation in commerce. But the 60, 61, and 62, the lower uncirculated grade categories, are usually reserved for very ugly uncirculated notes. Notes with a lot of handling, from counting or just bumping up against the inner portion of a safe or a vault for a long time. So you got corners kind of dinged and bumped and maybe soiled and counted. Those are like the ugly uncirculated grade categories. Then you got 63 and 64, which are considered choice uncirculated. It's a little nicer note. It's far from perfect. Could have a little corner bend here or there, and maybe the centering is not all that great. The margins are kind of out of balance. Then you have 65 and up, which are your gem uncirculated categories. 65 and 66 are real nice notes, but to the naked eye, there's still some imperfections. Centering's not that great. Maybe a little bit of handling, a little bit of an edge bump, maybe. Not too distracting, but it's there. Can't ignore it. Then 67 and up are what's called, from both services, both main reputable services, called Superb Gem Unk, Superb Gem Uncirculated. These are nicer notes still. 67, 68. Centering is getting better and better. What we call the registration of the note is improving. The registration being the way the printed imprintation of the back aligns with the printed plate imprintation of the front. So notes are obviously printed on both sides. There's a face and there's a back. And they get printed at different times, largely. In most cases, they get printed at different times. And if one is slightly off compared to the other, you just get a slight misalignment, which would preclude, a perfect grade, slightly imperfect. So that would be reserved for 67s, 68s, 69s that are really nice. Nice paper, original, sharp corners, sharp edges, great color, very limited amount of handling and counting, very, very slight, maybe, ripples in the paper. And then, of course, you have the final perfect grade of 70. And this is a note that's practically flawless, for all intents and purposes. The paper's great. The registration is a bullseye. You got nice, ample margins, sharp corners. And one could feasibly look at it, and multiple opinions can kind of concur that the note is nice and perfect. But that's very, very rare to come across. So that's considered the Sheldon scale. It is an adaptation from coins. Our cousins in the coin realm have used that since 1948 or 49. I think 49. It was developed by a prominent numismatist with the last name of Sheldon, William Sheldon, I believe. And I think his reasoning was something that's perfect, a 70. It should be worth about 70 times that of something that's barely identifiable.
Ah, I never knew that.
So likewise, something that grades a 60, an uncirculated coin, it's nice, but it's got a bunch of bag marks or whatever, should be worth about 3 times the value of that same coin, that same variety, in a VF20. So if the VF20 is worth $100, a nice UNC, or BU, I guess they call it, BU, brilliant uncirculated, 60 will be worth $300. So it's not a 100-point scale. This is a 70-point scale. It's a little tricky because some people look at 65 or 70, and in an academic setting, that's like an F, like a D or an F. Great.
A D, right?
It's a D. So a 65 or a 70 in our world obviously is a very strong grade. It's approaching perfection, if not perfect. So it's called the Sheldon scale of numismatics. It was borrowed from our coin brethren. Reasonable accommodations were made so that our grading scale applies to paper, and the way ink was printed on a paper versus metal, and the way that metal was struck. So coins don't fold. Paper money folds. Paper money doesn't get nicks and bag marks the same way coins do. So it's a loose interpretation of what was originally designed to apply to small metal discs. But we made it work.
Very good. Well, sometimes on the so in addition to the scale and the numerical grade that it gets, sometimes you hear the words net or apparent. We also hear PPQ and EPQ. Maybe you can describe those. Let's start with PPQ and EPQ. What does that mean?
So over the years, we're not the first people to collect paper money. Paper money's been collected for hundreds of years. So over the years, there's been opportunity for many collectors and many dealers to try to improve the way a note looks. And the first thing that anyone thinks of is, hey, this note has some bends and folds in it. Why don't I break out the old ironing board and spray bottle and spray it, and then with heat iron it so that the folds, the bends are all ironed out of it. PPQ and EPQ were developed 15, 16 years ago, 17 years ago, to better identify notes that have had that that haven't had that treatment. That's a common treatment to press a note. But there's other things that would preclude a note from getting PPQ or EPQ as well. PPQ stands for premium paper quality. EPQ stands for exceptional paper quality. I think CGA has the term OPQ, which stands for original paper quality. They all mean almost the same thing, and that is paper that is unmolested. It's original, as intended, as issued. It hasn't been, like I said, cooked or pressed or smashed or washed or cleaned in any odd way. And furthermore, it is without any problems. So paper is susceptible to a lot of problematic conditions: rips and tears and stains and rust and holes and ink and other types of writing and annotations and graffiti and alterations. People try to change, color in the design, redraw the design, attach, corners get torn off. People try to reattach corners. So if the paper is not entirely original as issued, and it's completely problem free to a reasonable degree, no toning and no foxing and no pinholes and staple holes. And I know pinholes and staple holes are kind of for French notes and for Indian notes and some notes from Pakistan. I know there's some pinholes sometimes come as issued, and that's kind of another topic. But for the most part, a PPQ or EPQ note cannot have any of these problems, and it must be entirely original. Now, you had also asked about net and apparent grade, Scott.
Yep. Yes, go ahead and finish that, and then we have a question to answer. But go ahead. Let's talk about net and apparent, and then we'll move on.
Okay, I think
we'll answer a question after that. Go ahead.
When a banknote has an issue that is kind of too big to ignore, it's unusual for that grade category to have a problem that's substantial, considerably distracting to the eye. Or there's something deceptive like a repair or a masked stain or a filled in, a repaired hole of some sort, a spindle hole, or some of the design's been redone, recolored, redesigned. Then that note would not only not be eligible for PPQ or EPQ, but graders would also kind of assign what's called a net or apparent grade. So it's not a clean grade, it's not a green grade, it's not a straight grade where it's just the number. It has the number, and then it will have this word next to it, net, N-E-T, in the case of one company, or apparent in the case of another company, apparent, A-P-P-A-R-E-N-T. And that would signify to a prospective buyer to, hold your horses. We're not talking about a run-of-the-mill XF40 here. We're talking about an XF40 apparent. Let's look a little further. Let's see what the graders have identified as a major issue with it. And in both cases, both third-party grading company holders have the details of that listed on the back of the holder. So you would turn the holder around, and then you would read perhaps the signatures on this national banknote were redrawn, or perhaps the upper left corner has been replaced and rebuilt, or perhaps the note was severed at some point and reattached back together. So these are major problems that these third-party graders feel that everyone should be in the know, buyer and seller. Everyone should kind of know what's happening with that note so that everyone can make an informed decision in the marketplace.
Awesome. All right. Well, we have our first question. It's a question from Steve. It says, third-party grading, a Sheldon scale is quite different from the IBNS grading standards. Can you comment on the differences, the pros and the cons of each?
I'm not very familiar with the IBNS grading standards, so I'm not qualified to address this question.
Fair enough. Okay. Here's another question from Michael. I have seen some banknotes with dog ears in corners and have passed as unk. Is it normal, or the graders missed, or have the graders missed the top corner folds?
So uncirculated notes, at least according to the standards in practice today by prominent reputable third-party grading companies, indicate that a note can indeed have corner tip bends and folds, as long as the fold line does not penetrate into the printed inked design of the note. So notes are built in most cases, not all, most cases notes are built with margins, white paper margins, up top, left, right, and at bottom on both sides of the note. And those margins are kind of built to take some damage just through the course of regular handling. And like I said earlier, when they're in the pack, a lot of times notes in the original packs, these packs get thrown around in and out of teller drawers and safes and vaults. And notes can sustain some minor, what looks like circulation patterns in the outer margins of the notes, including the corners, and still receive an uncirculated grade number from us. Now, they can't receive a gem uncirculated grade, but they can achieve something in the low in the low 60s, 63. Depends on how hard the folds are, the corner folds. If there's 3 or 4 corner folds, now we're looking at 62, and then down from there. But to answer your question, I'm sure, says, did the graders miss them? Well, I could guarantee I never missed a thing. Chances are we saw them and we determined that they did not affect the inked design, the inked portion of the banknote on either the face or the back. The design is unaffected. It is a little annoying and a little distracting up there in the far upper right corner to have a little dog ear corner fold. And it's a shame because maybe the note would have gotten a 67 or a 68 based upon its wonderful centering. And the rest of the note looks good. But because it has that corner fold, it's now a 64 or a 63.
Gotcha. All right, one more question, then we'll move on with some of our topics here. Does the vertical metallic, or if that's what you call it, thread inserted in the paper affect the uncirculated grade, since this always makes a rippled spot in the paper on the top of the note?
Yep, I know what you're talking about. The answer is no.
Okay, that's just part of the gig. All right, let me ask a couple more questions, and then we're going to get on to the grading process, and then we'll answer these other questions. I encourage the viewers to post your questions in the chat room, and we'll get to as many as we can. You sort of mentioned this, repairs and bleaching. Is that a common thing? Are people submitting, on an average? Well, we'll get to how many notes you grade in an average day, but what is a percentage of repairs and bleaching that comes through? Or can you comment?
Sure, I can comment. It's a fairly common practice, in the industry. I would say certain dealers and certain collectors probably do this more than others. But a lot of notes are heavily circulated, and some are dirty, and some people think that it may be better to give them a bath, and they come up with various chemical solutions to try to extract dirt from the paper, the fibers of the paper. And unfortunately, when this is done, a lot of the times, the chemicals used, whether they're solvents or bleach solution, or they're detergents or surfactants or soaps or whatever, dishwashing detergent, whatever's being used, can also kind of run amok on the ink, on the original ink of the note itself. So it is a problem. People giving these notes a bath, and then they bring them out of the solution, they dry them out, and typically anywhere where there's a hard fold line throughout the note has some folds. Well, where the paper has broken due to those folds, you have ink that's susceptible of becoming dislodged. And after a good bath, a lot of these notes have these vertical or horizontal voids in the ink where ink loss has been created due to the harsh washing. So if there's any newbies out there that are looking to improve, the appearance of their notes by soaking them, just be careful, because you could sometimes do more harm than good.
Very good. All right, so let's talk about, and we'll get to your questions here in a minute. So the grading process. You're based here in Los Angeles. You mentioned earlier that there are other locations within the United States that these companies sub out to. Are there other countries that do grading? Your country, I guess what I'm asking is, LA just the only place where that's Mecca for grading, or how's it work?
Okay, so I'd like to say I'm here tonight representing Phil Thomas. So I'm not speaking on behalf of either of any of these grading services. I happen to work for one. That's kind of a separate issue. I'm speaking tonight out of here for myself, out of my own personal knowledge and experience and expertise over the years. I could say that from my knowledge of third-party grading in general, and I'm intimately familiar with all of these services and the leadership and management of both, and various graders coming and going over the years, that domestically, these companies maintain offices here in the U.S., but they also maintain offices overseas. Europe and Asia are kind of the two hotspots for this type of collector activity. So both companies have set up shop across the globe in those continents. There's also a number of submission centers worldwide that they operate, whether it's in Australia or Vietnam or Latin America, different parts of Europe, different parts of Asia. So these companies have developed a pretty good worldwide reputation. And I think they're seen, and that's not to say there's not other grading companies around. I think there's some grading companies up in Canada that do a good job. I know for a fact there's some in Europe that do a very good job, and there's some in Asia that do a good job. I do believe that the two American companies have a very strong reputation worldwide for impartiality and for accuracy and for consistency and for having strong financial backing to their guarantees. So these companies, we're not just grading and encapsulating notes, we're actually writing an insurance policy for them where, hey, this is the grade, we're saying it's problem free. Here's our name, here's our stamp of approval on it, and we put our money where our mouth is. So if we're wrong, we're going to make it right. So I think that's what the world audience has come to love about the two main American firms, is that we're not perfect, and this applies to coins as well. Based upon the volume we do, there's always going to be some coins or some notes that slip through the cracks. And when that happens, we have a written contractual guarantee in place so that if someone was damaged by our mistake, based on the terms of our grade guarantee, we will make them whole.
Interesting. All right, so let's talk about, if you can, and whatever you can describe, the environment that you work in. And again, you can be neutral, or I don't know how you want to explain it, but I think people are you in an office building, in a warehouse, you're in a high rise, or does it matter what the room is like? Is it dark? What kind of lights do you have? What kind of magnification do you have? And you're one of how many graders? Anyway, if you could just sort of explain the environment and the day, if that makes sense, or as much as you can.
We are in a secret, undisclosed location, 20 feet under pure cement, Scott. And if I were to tell you where we're located, I'd have to kill you.
Okay, well, okay. So, all right, well, I won't start poking around Los Angeles, but that's okay. But all right, let's just talk about lights. Yeah, I know.
So we have grading rooms set up with screens for various data entry that we do while managing the order. We have specialized lighting, certain types of light. You want a good, nice, bright light that shines across the surface of a note. So you go to a coin show and everyone has paper money lying flat down in their showcase. And then you have overhead lights. You look up, you have the overhead lights at the show, and they come straight down on the note. So everyone's looking down straight flat at the note. And all these dealers call all their notes uncirculated, gem uncirculated. Well, you really can't tell the true grade of a piece of paper when you're shining light directly down at it and your eyes are looking down at the note. So in order to get a good, accurate assessment of a note's true grade, which a lot of it's based upon if it has folds, and then if so, how many folds, how hard are the folds, and where are the folds, you have to have a nice angle of the light shining from the side where it hits your eye like this, and from that angle where the light is coming to the note, bounces off the note and hits your eye is unable to perceive any folds that exist within the note. Especially difficult sometimes are folds that have been pressed out. We talked about pressing earlier. You may be able to press them out a lot of the way, but it's kind of hard to get rid of a fold 100% of the way. Sometimes you could do it, maybe. But most of the time, there is kind of a remnant trace of where that paper surface broke at one point as a result of that fold. So that's why you get that special angle of light from these light fixtures that us graders use in the grading room. Some graders, most graders, I would say maybe all graders, use an overhead light as well of a certain other type of caliber, certain type of light, incandescent light from above, where you can see if the paper is toned or yellowed in any certain way. You want to be able to candle a note to have light pass through the paper. You can pick up some detail that way as well. So in the grading room are different types of lights. We do use loops to kind of see, closer into a situation to see if something is indeed a little speck of rust, or if it's an inclusion in the paper. We may need to use a loop to magnify that. We do use microscopes of various sorts. We do use different types of light. And I see Steve Russell asks, do you inspect the notes under UV light? UV stands for ultraviolet light. It's a different wavelength of light, to look for defects and white backlight when grading. Steve Russell, the answer is yes to both of those, UV and white backlight for sure. So we have the lighting. We have a nice, comfortable desk. We have plenty of beverages surrounding our grading stations so that they can. No, actually, we don't allow food or drink in the grading room, and obviously we take the utmost of care while handling anyone's notes. We consider these notes sacred, so we make sure everything comes in and out of holders. We know what we're doing. We treat every note that we handle like it's our own.
So are there multiple graders in one room, or do you have your own office and then the note gets passed to the next guy in the next office? And how many guys are actually looking at one particular note?
I think the configuration can vary, but I think the configuration varies. But I think these companies probably have a nice big grading room with multiple graders in one room, and then there may be some graders offsite in both cases, and there may be the finalizer down the hall that kind of gets involved with some of the bigger, more expensive notes, and in general, every note sees multiple graders. There's never a time anywhere where, to my knowledge, where one note will come in and one person will grade that note, and that's the final say, and it goes out the door. There's also additional verification steps even after a note's graded. Once it's put into the plastic, once the note's encapsulated, there's an additional verification measure that's taken to make sure everything's lined up and there's been no data entry errors, and that the grade wasn't the note wasn't somehow, heaven forbid, mangled after the time it left the grade finalizer's desk and went over the ceiling. So we're just making sure everything came out right, in the end, and before it was ultimately shipped back.
Okay. On average, how long are you looking at a note, or each grader looking at a note on an average? And then extrapolating that, how many notes on a full workday do you look at, roughly?
So I think if it's a big time note, it's a 6-figure note, or 5 or 6 figure or 7-figure note, I think that we could take hours on it, figure out what happened to it, where it's been.
Gotcha.
I think if it's a 1957 $1 silver, or a modern euro, or German inflationary Weimar Republic note that's worth a couple bucks, I think we can probably grade that within, let's just say, less than a minute.
Gotcha.
And I think that a good grader can grade, I don't know, several hundred notes in a day or more.
All right. But when all the watermelon notes come through your office, that takes a little more time than that. Is that it? For those of you, what is there, 2 in the world or something? I don't know. It's $1,000 US note. So we had a familiar face ask a question. Oh, we just answered. That was from Phil here in Los Angeles as well.
And what did Phil say?
Phil said, how many notes a day do you actually grade? So I think we just answered that.
Yeah.
So,
sure. I think.
Back up a question here. Richard asked, with all the China forgeries floating around, does the encapsulating company, if they get one sent in, reject them or encapsulate them and mark them as a forgery or a copy? So those of us that collect world notes, yeah, that's a big problem, unfortunately.
So I think the answer, I imagine you're talking about mostly a lot of that, the forged PRC material.
Correct.
From the late 40s and early 50s. So that's not eligible for encapsulation. We're not gonna certify any of that material. In general, we won't and then for U.S. material, we don't certify. So we're not going to certify. The PRC stuff is to some extent still legal tender. So anything that's still legal tender, that's honored by some government or some central bank, if it's a counterfeit, it's basically like contraband. Mm-hmm. It's illegal somewhere on the planet. It's illegal to possess. Whether or not anyone's going to enforce that, that's another story. But in general, we are not going to certify any counterfeit material. There are examples where contemporary counterfeits of older material can be highly collected. There's reference books and material out there that discuss, for instance, counterfeit Confederate notes, U.S. Confederate notes, CSA material. That's all. There's a whole book devoted for it, where it talks about the different types of counterfeits that came out and the tells and the diagnostics. So that is indeed, we do certify that material. We will identify it as such. Same thing with the colonials and continentals back in the 1700s. A lot of that stuff was counterfeited. There's stories behind a lot of that stuff, like these continentals were counterfeited by the British, in an effort to tank the economy. And it's like, the third E from the left is kind of crooked, and that's the tell. This E is like crooked, and it's like, this is the contemporary counterfeit. And we will put that in a holder because it has historical significance. No one's trying to fool someone, on a modern basis. This was done back in the day.
Right.
It's as old as the original material itself. So we believe there is collector value to that. We're not breaking any law, by handling it and putting our trademark logo on its holder. So we'll do that. But if anything is modern, it's meant to deceive. It's a facsimile or some sort of novelty item. Bad replicas that are printed out on people's printers. The PRC stuff. We just kick it. We'll turn it away.
Gotcha. On the labels, when you identify notes, whether they're U.S. or foreign, I suppose you have I'm assuming you have your company and the other company have standard information that they put on those. Other than provenance on a note, can somebody ask for something special on the labels, or
yeah,
like special request, or do they pay for that?
Everything has a price. Everything has a price, Scott.
Gotcha. All right.
Everybody has a price.
All right. Okay.
We're not gonna approve. Consider like the DMV when you get a specialized license plate. Like you can't say offensive things, or like ridiculous.
Right, but I guess some let's go to world notes, where maybe there's multiple sources for reference numbers or something like that. I mean, can people put?
If someone wants a second or third reference, we'll usually appease them. We'll put them in the main body of the label of the spec. Okay. The pedigree. If you're talking about the pedigree where there's special requests, I was thinking more like the Scott collection
or the Eamon Carter collection, right? Something like that. Yeah. Okay. And I think I already know the answer to this, but can more than one note be in a single holder? And I bring this up because I remember somebody that I used to know, they had some North African sequential notes that were all in unk, and he was able to get them in one holder as 1, 2, 3. Is that still a practice today? Because this was probably 7 or 8 years ago that this was done. But
it's on a case-by-case basis.
Gotcha. Okay.
If we can engineer it, if we could physically engineer it safely, we'll try. But we have our rules. Generally we want a weld. We want a seal between the subjects, so they're not floating around hitting.
Right. Yeah, that's how this one was. Yeah.
So we have some standards. Some brand standards of quality, and then we'll try. But we'll do our best. I think a lot of times we will advise submitters that they need to be in separate holders.
Gotcha. Once you hit the next question there, can you see that on the screen?
Oh yeah, I know. I know. That's so the question is, why don't grading companies put remarks when notes are washed or clean? A washed note with the same number of folds grades the same as non-washed notes, and no comments are mentioned usually. So true, but we do, since we factor in eye appeal, it's possible that a note that has not been washed could get a 30, and maybe because of these ugly, washed out, whited out, ink lost fold lines, maybe now it's like more like a 25 because of the ink loss. So it is possible that washing can affect either positively or negatively. Sometimes it could actually make the note look better, and maybe it's now a 35. It's our opinion. Opinions are subjective, but ultimate detailers, I like the question. I don't know why. I don't know why these standards are the way they are. I didn't make these standards, but generally that's really never been called out. Washed, cleaned, or pressed. I suspect because if third-party graders called out notes that were obviously washed, cleaned, or pressed every single time, there would be a substantial percentage of the notes that they see would be qualified with those things. So we're trying not to slaughter, it's just, I know coins, like if a coin's been improperly cleaned, like harshly cleaned, the coin people will call it out. But if it's been kind of lightly, whatever they do to them, with a
light wash, yes.
A light, we used to have these little rags and.
That's right. When we were kids. That's right. That's right.
And that's
shining up pennies, right?
Yeah. So like it's so prolific that you kind of let the that's one of the things where maybe a future buyer, prospective buyer, can take a look himself and say, hey, this looks washed. I kind of don't want it pass. Versus us having to call that type of thing out. But it is a good question. It is a very good question.
Good. You want to hit another question before we move on? Let's see. Phil asks, again, a second question. How often do you see counterfeit English notes that were produced during World War II? Are they easy to identify by all the graders, and are they marked as such?
Yeah. We see those. Talk about the Bank of England notes from the concentration camp. We see them. I would say maybe on a monthly basis, and then we do consider them contemporary forgeries. Certainly. Yeah.
Gotcha. I have another question here I think you can answer. This is from Owen. How do you label modern world notes issued after the standard catalog of world paper money stopped being published in 2019, which all lack PIC numbers or can?
It's not. I have an answer. It's not a great answer, but the answer is we will use the term PIC new, N-E-W.
Gotcha. Okay.
And if there's another regional reference, we'll put that as the secondary catalog. If it's
you will.
Like,
okay.
Yeah, like up in Canada, or like the Rennick's book out of Australia, like they usually will have some updates that are more contemporary.
All right. The reference numbers was another topic, so I get it. So
yeah.
Here's another one. How do you account for the fact that rust in paper continues to expand even after graded and sealed? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So rust is a chemical reaction, right? So it's something ferrous, something made of iron. When exposed to moisture, even moisture in the air, creates a chemical reaction. The byproduct is rust. It's a form of oxidation, and something will continue to rust out as long as there's the raw material for it to do so. So Jaime, you're right. Rust can grow over time, and when we see rust, we generally call it out. I think we're probably a little more eager to call out rust. When we see rust, we make a comment of rust versus, let's say, a little bit of adhesive or something that we know is not going to be an issue. If we see chunk of rust the same size, we're probably more likely to call that out, thinking that it's possible that it could expand. In general, it's not going to expand that much. Once it's in a holder, an airtight encapsulation, you may see a little tad bit of growth, but it's not like, I know coins has a big problem with like milk spots on silver coins, and I mean within a few years you could really, your coin can turn into a monster.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some examples of rust getting a little more pronounced, especially if it's treated. People try to treat rust with like improperly treat rust, and then it may go away for like a few months or something, and then after a while the rust kind of comes back, if it's not fully isolated and removed what's causing the rust, which is basically a little chunk of metal generally causes rust, or exposure to metal, contact with metal, where the paper surface has gleaned off some of that ferrous metallic residue. The answer is, how do we account for it? Well, we can't. Impossible.
Because you can't stop it, so it is what it is.
There's no stopping what can't be stopped. But the overwhelming majority of rusted notes with rust, have already rusted out. We're dealing with notes that are 50, 100 years old, 200 years old. There's a little rust on it. Whatever's there has already rusted out, has already run its course.
Got it. Let's do two more questions. Michael, when it comes to guarantees, why is it that if it is overgraded, third-party grading will either pay the difference, while if it is undergraded, client has to send it for regrading and pay again? That's a good question. Don't know if you can, but do your best.
Well,
or can you?
So the question is, if something's undergraded and then they have to send it back to us, and then we realize the error of our ways, and we admit it, and we actually increase the grade, why should they pay?
I guess that's the question.
So this is an opinion-based service, and one day we had one opinion, and then when we were asked to reconsider it, maybe we brought in another grader and for a second opinion and came to a consensus that we'll round up this time. But generally, we're not wrong in the first place.
Gotcha.
So when we are wrong, so why should the customer pay? Well,
sounds like a management question.
Yeah, it is. I was going to say, just be happy you got the upgrade, but that's a bad answer. It's a smart answer.
I think it's a management question, and they can argue over the cost of the grading between management and the submitter.
Hopefully the higher grade more than offsets the cost of the second, the expense for having it graded a second time.
There you go. All right, one more question. We have somebody named Larry from California. How do you arrive at a grade for original packs? That's a good question. With the new pack grading.
Larry Thomas, who's that?
I don't know. Who is that guy?
So this is kind of a highly contentious thing. When a company, one of the companies rolled out pack grading, the question was, how do you grade a pack of 100 notes? So I think it's probably, from my knowledge, speaking from what I know about pack grading, I believe it's a matter of kind of what everyone on this call would think it is. It's the grader takes a look at all 100 notes, and it's a general, maybe not a scientific average, but kind of a general feeling average of the centering of each of the notes. So if most of the notes are centered, choice CU with a very small margin at left, most of them are like that, then chances are it's going to get a choice CU grade. If most of the notes, the pack was bumped up, the corner of the pack was bumped up against the inside, the metal wall of the safe, and they all have a little, as someone said earlier, a dog ear corner. Well, then the pack's going to be a choice pack. And then conversely, if the pack is like pristine, not been handled, a lot of these packs get used and abused by people, flipping through the pack. And then a lot of dealers don't know what they're doing. So their inventory, they shuffle this inventory around from show to show. They're banging things up against the inside of their showcase and in their luggage. So if a pack hasn't sustained any of that damage, and most of the notes are really centered real nicely, front and back, big margins, no problems, no teller stamps on the first note, then maybe that pack is eligible for a superb gem grade. Now, just because we give a pack the grade of 67, that doesn't mean they're not we, but a company. Just because a company gives the grade of 67 doesn't mean that there couldn't be any 68s or 69s individually in that pack.
Right.
It probably means there's some 66s in there as well that maybe kind of offset those higher grades. So it's just it's the reasonability factor.
All right.
We're reasonably applying a grade to 100 notes based upon what we perceive to be the average grade of each of those notes. This is how a company would do it if they did it.
Got it. Have they been grading packs since 2005, or is that a fairly rare news?
My understanding that's not been the case. I think one of the main companies has recently gone to pack grading.
Gotcha. All right. The future of grading, in Phil Thomas's opinion. I mean, the 70 scale is here to stay. The Sheldon, as you explained earlier, I never thought about why, but it makes sense now. But because I've heard rumors of 100 point, switching to 100 point sounds like it'd be like turning the Titanic around. I mean, you'd have a lot of people upset. But your thoughts in general, other grading companies, I don't know. Like grading packs is fairly new. Is there anything on the horizon that note wise or banknote wise it's were to look for?
I don't think the 70-point scale is going anywhere, but I have heard that one of the companies, at least in their coin division, is trying out a 100-point scale for coins. And I think this is if a submitter checks a certain box, he or she can request their coin to be graded on a 100-point scale. And effectively, it's like the same thing. It's just it's a 70-point scale extrapolated
correct
up to 100. So whatever that looks like, maybe an XF45 is now an XF60 or something.
Right.
Kind of gimmicky to me to move it. I think
it's like what you talked about before. It's like when we were in high school or something. Yes, I mean 100 is a perfect score.
Yeah, actually it's a 10-point scale. I think they moved it to a 10-point scale.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, 10.
But it's my understanding it wasn't to replace the 70-point Sheldon scale. It was like an option that could be chosen.
Right. Well, before we have some fun with some individual notes, any great collections, any great notes that you can talk about that have come across your desk in recent times, and something that's like a wow submission?
These companies, guys that work for these companies, third-party companies, really get to see it all. It's like amazing on a day in and day out basis. There's both services see 5 and 5-figure notes on a daily basis, and then probably 6-figure notes on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say 6 figures, I'm talking about US dollars, so $100,000 and up. But we see everything from high denomination notes from all around the globe. In the US, high denomination is like 500,000, 5,000, $10,000 bills. In other countries, that means different things. Higher denomination notes, very rare notes, scarce notes. From a world perspective, we see a lot of really good early India material. We see some good Southeast Asian material, fancy serial numbers, serial number ones, solid serial numbers, ladders. We see good, earlier European colonial material, German colonies, French colonies, Portuguese colonies. A lot of rare Queen Elizabeth stuff. Queen Elizabeth has kind of been hot ever since her passing. Good Canadian material, early chartered Canada Bank stuff, high grade stuff. Anything, even fairly common notes in high grade, meaning 67, 68, 69, 70. That stuff can be very valuable as well. But we see it all, Scott. There's been a number of good collections that have come to market in recent years. Great collection out of Mexico, Mexican revolutionary material. A lot of early, a lot of great examples from earlier colonial notes, U.S. colonial notes from the early 1700s, early to mid 1700s, and late 1700s. We see, with I don't want to get into this on this call. It's a hot topic, but with the Russian special military operation going on in Ukraine, we've seen a lot of Ukrainian material, Russian revolutionary material from the Bolshevik Revolution, pre the Tsar Nicholas stuff, and so we're seeing a lot of neat stuff kind of come out of the woodworks based upon some current events. Sometimes Queen Elizabeth dies, the next day we get 1,000 Queen Elizabeth notes. Putin invades Ukraine, boom,
Ukrainian notes, right?
Yeah. So
yeah. All right. Well, I want to bring in somebody else, somebody that's pulling the strings in the background. Amy, if you would jump in and introduce yourself real quick. There she is. So Amy is my partner in these monthly live streams, and is the director of operations, I should say. So we're going to have some fun with Phil. We've got some notes that he's going to take a look at and give us his opinion on. But first, the World Paper Money Club. We sponsor a local coin show here in Los Angeles, and it just happened this past weekend. So I think we have a quick little video where I was looking at a note, and maybe Larry, you could comment on it. You want to hit that, Amy? The Mexican. If
you're writing a note out of the show and you think it's uncirculated, you want to flip it over, hold it up to a light source, and if you hold it just right, you'll see that this particular note has a centerfold. That's because people fold notes like that. You don't want to do that though. So you always check the back side. So this note would grade AU. It's not uncirculated because it's been folded once. But it's a great note. Revolutionary. 100 pesos, 1914.
how'd I do, Larry?
You're unmuted.
You're talking to me, Scott?
Yeah, I just said, how did I do? Because most notes are folded,
I think you bonked that lower left corner when you put it back in the hole.
Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. So I won't. Okay. All right. Anyway, we're just having some fun, but I've been around some notes for a while too, as you. So anyway, I think we've got 3 notes. Amy's going to what?
Well, we're backlogged on questions from the audience. So,
okay,
we're at the hour mark, Scott. So I think we should do rapid fire Q&A and.
Okay, so next, Jaime has another question. It says, thanks for the answer. Back in the day, people were obsessed with stapling money together, and rust marks are a real issue in some of my pre-1900 notes. Those, as you said before, those rust marks marks are probably not going to get any bigger, especially if it's pre-1900. I mean, it's been 120 years since those were stapled. I'm guessing that, I don't know. What do you have to add to that?
Yeah, but these notes are encapsulated like at ambient, temperature and humidity, and there's always a little moisture in the air, but not much. And once you get that in between, the plastic. By the way, these companies use a special high quality type of inert plastic that doesn't contain various acids. Plastic that was used back in the 70s and 80s in these kind of junk holders. People would put notes in these lower quality plastic holders, and you had the potential for there to be PVC damage, where acid kind of leaches into the paper and kind of just discolors it and kind of saturates it. So the plastic we use, once something's kind of encapsulated, it's pretty darn safe. And nobody can guarantee that rust won't, get a little bigger over time. But in the absence of additional humidity and moisture, it's unlikely that rusty pinholes will expand all that much. But we see it a lot. Pinholes, if they're big, we'll call out pinholes. If there's a lot of rust, we'll call out rust, minor rust. But if it's little tiny little pinholes on a very highly circulated note with a little bit of rust, we'll generally maybe ignore that. Depends on the severity, how it affects eye appeal, and then what the overall grade of the note is to begin with.
All right. Well, here's a good question. I hadn't thought about this. And Richard says, does each note graded get an image posted on the grader's website along with a number that they assign on the back?
The answer is yes.
Okay, so every note gets put into your census and all right.
At both services, image notes.
Gotcha.
And yeah.
All right.
The questions are going to pop up on the screen, Scott, okay?
Okay, I see it. Another question from Owen. Have you seen examples of people falsifying third-party sleeves and grades? Is that something common? Meaning somebody is forging what you guys do?
Yeah. We see it. Sometimes these will pop up on eBay, and the seller will have surprisingly zero feedback on eBay.
Right.
And they just signed up on eBay yesterday, and they have a note that's they have $1,000 bill, in a XYZ holder, and the thing looks like it was just, printed off of a heritage auction archive and laminated a certain weird way. There's also more sophisticated counterfeits. I think this happens more of the time on the coin side. I think they're mainly out of, to my knowledge, overseas, China. I think some of these counterfeits get built overseas and traded overseas. Kind of gets if one appeared at a show over here, it would kind of get laughed off the bourse floor. But that's why it's important to when you're making a big purchase of something, investing a lot of money in a particular note, you could always go to one of the websites from one of the two prominent third-party graders, and you can verify the certification number. Type in the certification number, and you can see if the note in the holder is matching up. Serial numbers match up. The holders also come with a number of anti-counterfeit features, both companies. So whether it's the kind of embossed weld,
right,
outer weld of the holders embossed a certain way, color shifting ink on the label, NFC tag where you put your cell phone up against the tag of the holder, and there's like a little microchip inside that launches a browser on your phone, and it goes to the third-party company's website, allows you to see that note up on the website. So it's a game of cat and mouse, or I guess you build a better mousetrap. The mice get smarter. You got to build a better mousetrap. The mice try to figure that out. So that's what we're good for. That's what these companies are here for. We're here to help dealers and collectors move merchandise and be comfortable and confident with their transactions. Both sides knowing exactly what they're buying and selling. We're looking to, combat things that hurt the industry overall, such as counterfeiting.
Mm-hmm.
Counterfeiting.
Well, you got to protect your brand. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So,
we're all in it. We're all in it together. We're all in it together. So we're all looking to eradicate anything that harms our beloved hobby.
Right. All right. If you can you hang for 10 minutes?
Sure.
Okay. So, Amy, let's try a couple notes.
Double graded by separate.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I've seen a number of notes double graded by separate third-party grading companies. This is common practice or special request to have done. So, I could speak for probably both companies here. The two main companies that I have in mind here domestically in the States with a worldwide presence won't grade a note in another in the competitor's holder. There's a crossover service where one note can go from one service to the other, but that requires the note to be cut out. Once it's graded, once it's crossed, the grade's decided on, that note gets cut out, removed, and then re-encapsulated in the other company's holder. So you say double graded. I guess it's possible that someone could keep the old holder, the old label, that's been, that was cut out, that was removed, and kind of say, hey, this note got this grade, this note got the same grade at both services. So it really must be a 65 if two companies have agreed to that. But really, that note is only going to reside in one home at any single point in time.
Correct. All right. How do you identify a banknote that is original if it is unlisted?
I'm assuming you're referring to PIC unlisted in the one of the PIC catalogs.
I don't know. Shala, can you, if that's how you say your name, can you be more specific? You can type that in.
If let me just answer it. I think one specific catalog isn't the end of the line. If something's not in one catalog, there's other ways to research a note, figure out what it is. There's a number of websites. There's auction house records that we use. There's other types of reference material that may cover something that is not maybe listed in PIC. And then in general, there's just general principles of what is banknote paper, what is security paper, intaglio printing, how an intaglio or lithograph looks, how it should look, how a letterpress should look, how overprints should look. And over time, there's enough, we have the expertise in the grading room. Someone's going to know. And in the event that we don't know, there's always experts that may do. So sometimes we reach out to people who have perhaps a little more expertise in a highly specialized area and maybe get a second opinion from someone else outside the grading room. But we'll get it right eventually.
You got it. So, Aim, you want to try one note?
I just want to get caught up on the questions because we are backlogged on questions and people have been waiting like 40 minutes to have their questions
answered. All rapid
fire.
Okay, rapid fire. Fire them out.
This is the rapid fire round. Go. I keep seeing this China forgeries question.
Yeah. Next question, Aim. We've already answered that one.
They get kicked.
Yeah.
I'm going to answer in 10 words or less.
Go.
I don't see anything.
It's coming here.
There are no words there. Why choose one grading service versus another? I think it's a matter of personal preference.
Exactly. Personal choice.
How the holder looks. I think market values for material are similar. Grading, I think, is probably similar. I have a preference for one, but we'll leave it. I won't mention what that one is, but I think you can't go wrong with either service.
You can say it. Scott's grading system, right? No, I'm just teasing. Okay. Any other questions there, Aim? All right, so let's try this one. This is we'll get a close-up of this. Do your best. You're not beholden to anything. Chinese note. This is a what do we got here? 1934 10 won. And Amy's going to do her best to see what you think. What are we looking for?
Nice colorful note. There's that watermark area there on the right. Can you turn it around, Amy? Turn it Bank of China. It's a prolific issuer, obviously prior to the PRC and the revolution there. Prolific issuer, I think a couple hundred different picks. Bank of China, beautiful note. It certainly looks unk from here, but again, I can't tell from here.
It looks like a little rust maybe on the side, on the edges, maybe on the back. Not rust, but staining or so. But
yeah, I see some yellowing, some aging. Some people call that foxing, where it's possible there's, believe it or not, foxing is like a lie. It's like a biological colony.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a fungus. And when it grows, it kind of makes in paper, it makes that off-colored, that yellow look. So a note like this, let's say there's no folds, uncirculated. So it would be somewhere in the 60 to 70, right?
Right.
But since it has that yellowing around the edges, and I don't know, that could be a result of it having been mounted at some point too. It could be adhesive residue or just mounting stains or toning. But because it has that, a note like this would not be eligible to receive a gem uncirculated grade. It would max out at a numeric grade of 64.
Correct. Right.
And then based upon how bad we perceived those stains to be, we would either withhold either PPQ or EPQ. And I'm not speaking on behalf of either service. This is
I know that. We've clarified that. Yeah.
A grading.
This is you, Phil, right? Yeah.
Would either withhold PPQ or EPQ, or they may indeed decide to make a comment of minor stains for a note like that.
Gotcha. All right. Let's jump up to the next one. Let's do okay, there we go. That's a nice note. This is a 1938, Iranian 1938, 1,000 reals. This is a, beautiful note.
Reza. All right. Well, see, upper left corner, it's possible there could be a corner fold there. See that?
Yeah. Can you hold that up there, Aim? Is it any
Possibly.
closer? Or can you tell us, Aim, if you see anything? Oh, yeah. I see it. Look at you,
Possible.
sharp eyes.
Now, the question is, does that penetrate or permeate into the frame line up there at upper left?
Yeah.
And
Turn it over. Let's see if we can see the backside. So it'd be in the upper right. I don't really see anything there.
I do.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know what you're looking for, so.
Yeah, I see it. So this is probably a choice note. Well, is there a center bend? There may be a vertical center bend down the middle too. Maybe. I kind of see some hints of it at the top margin and the bottom margin.
Can you see that right in the center, Aim? At the top center, bottom center. Oh yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So let's say that there is a vertical center bend, and that's the most common area for a note to have a bend or a fold, simply because as soon as someone received that from their bank or from their employer as part of their pay or whatever, the first thing people do is they fold it to either put it in their pocket or put it in their wallet.
Mm-hmm.
So a note like that, once it has that fold down the middle, it generally, if it's complete and if it's hard enough there, it generally precludes any type of uncirculated grade. The highest grade a note like that could get with a vertical centerfold is a 58.
Correct.
Which is considered almost unk. And then if there's some partial folds here and there or some corners, then it can go down to 55, 53. A lot of notes will have a trifold, left,
Right.
center, and right. It's called a trifold. Some people call it a quarter fold.
Well, especially with American notes, because we used to have bill folds where the notes were larger, so to fold them up, you would have two folds, right?
Two or
Two
three.
folds.
Yeah, two. Yeah.
Right.
And then
I mean,
if it gets done
today's wallets and the smaller notes, we usually have one big centerfold. But yeah, in
Just
the old
one.
days, that's true. All right, we got one more for you, and then we'll answer a few more questions, and then we'll wrap it up here. So this is a where's my notes here? 1960 Jamaican 1961 pound note, Queen Elizabeth.
There she is.
Yep.
Long live the Queen. There looks to be a little. Is there like looks maybe like a handling crease at left, right behind Queen Elizabeth, right behind her neck. Maybe a partial diagonal fold.
Yep.
Now I don't know if that thing extends completely through the serial number, and if it goes all the way down to the very bottom edge of that note, then we'd be looking at a note that's AU at best.
No, they're 58 at best, correct?
58 at best. But if it's just kind of half there, it's just a product of someone harshly counting the note, handling it like this, taking their thumb and kind of licking it and kind of putting a crease in it, then it would still be eligible for an uncirculated grade, but probably one on the lower spectrum of grade.
60, 62, so, or 1.
And then I think I see something at left, on the left far edge, and maybe a little discoloration of some sort.
Right. So
something like that would probably eliminate this note's ability to get that PPQ or EPQ.
Got it.
So I have that as either an AU from what I could tell here. Maybe a lower unk, but it looks like a nice bright note. It's got a nice beautiful underprint to it there in the center, nice watermark. I think the watermark at right is also Queen Elizabeth. You can hold it up, Amy, and
you'd have to hold it to a light source, but yeah.
Actually, I think it's a pineapple.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. Not the Queen.
She loved to eat her pineapples.
Very good.
All right, well, we've got looks like one more question. Aim, if you could put how to contact Phil, for those of you who want to contact him. It says, what type of attributes are required for a note to earn PPQ or EPQ in lower grades like VG10 through VF20? I don't think you do that, do you? Isn't a certain grade and higher that gets...
How you doing, Jeremy? Funny that Jeremy asked this question. This is right up his alley. I know Jeremy. So, Jeremy, you know the answer to this, but thank you for the question. So, this is just a note that has sustained what he's talking about, lower grade with PPQ, EPQ. Companies will do this. There's a different line. One company has a slightly higher threshold. I think one company begins at 20 or 25. The other company will go down to maybe 12. But in general, these are just notes that are beat up. They've been a part of a lot of commerce over the years. They've come and gone. They've seen it all. They've acquired a lot of dirt, a lot of honest wear and tear, but nothing crazy. No tears, no holes, no stains, no blood stains, no rust, no funny business. They haven't been through the wash. They haven't. We like to see if we're going to give a low circulated note with a low circulated grade. If we're going to give it PPQ or EPQ, we still like to see a little embossing somewhere in the note, despite the fact that it's been handled and circulated for that long of a time frame. We still like to see some embossing. It could either be the intaglio engraving embossed through to the back, the main plate embossing, or it could be the overprint, some part of the serial number or the seal embossed. Still see a little of that 3D action taking place, despite the fact that it has a million folds and is kind of that brownish color just from good old-fashioned honest dirt from the hands. And then a note like that, as long as it's problem-free, no ink loss, still nice and bright, sharp corners for the most part, sharp edges, no edge tears. That note will perhaps be eligible for PPQ and EPQ. I even know a collector that specializes in that type of material.
Okay. Hint, hint. Very good. All right. Well, we want to welcome you to our show, Phil. You're welcome back anytime to jump in, even if it's for 10 minutes to give your thoughts on grading here and there. There is Phil's email if you'd like to email him with any other further questions. For those of you out there, if you think you can contribute to the show in a full presentation like Phil just gave, which we're going on almost an hour and a half here, or even if you want to jump in for the next show, which will be April 3rd, Monday, 6:30 Pacific Standard Time, please contact us as well. And again, Phil, big thumbs up, much appreciated with all the information, and thank you all for joining. See you then.
Thank you.
Thank you.